Hey, Link here. Thanks for joining me for episode 105, where I speak with Ricardo Bare. In this episode, we talk about how and what inspired them to get into the industry, how they got their start making levels, their views on the immersive sim renaissance, getting to enjoy the magic of games for the first time again through his kids, his life outside of gaming, as well as some lightning round questions. Before we get started, don't forget there are links in the episode description that you can follow to learn more about Ricardo as well as the podcast. Also, don't forget to like and share the episode. Without further ado, enjoy episode 105. Hi, welcome to the Red Tunic Podcast, a podcast where I look to rediscover what makes gaming fun and enjoyable by having positive conversations with those related to the industry. My name is Link, and today I'm joined by Ricardo Bare, known for their contributions to Deus Ex, Dishonored, Prey, Redfall, and Prey Mooncrash. Hi, Ricardo. How are you doing today?
Hello, I'm doing really well. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
You know, the pleasure is all mine. I really appreciate you making the time to be here, to speak with me, especially so close to the holidays when I know that everything starts to get really hectic and really busy. So thank you so much for, agreeing to speak with me and giving me time to, bug you with some game topic stuff.
Of course, I'm really glad to be here. And speaking of hectic, all of my kids are out of school and they're on break. So I apologize if you hear a bunch of craziness in the room, the next room over.
No worries, no apologies necessary. That is I imagine that is just life with kids in general. I don't have any children. However, I used to help out with like a local babysitter,
Mm.
and I am well versed in uh the chaos that can be children
Oh yeah.
being crazy, being kids.
hmm
Um but yeah, no, especially with that in mind, then thank you for agreeing to speak with me on this Friday evening when when they're probably, bouncing off the walls for the holiday break as well.
You bet.
So, Ricardo, before we get started though, I'm wondering if you would mind saying, speaking to uh wow, I screwed that up. I shouldn't have screwed that up. I'm wondering if you would be able to give a quick rundown of like who you are, what you do, or like kind of like the elevator pitch for anyone that's listening and is like, well, who is this Ricardo person? Just so that everyone gets like an easy base level.
Sure, I'll give you the quick version. I have been making video games since about 1999. Um, and the very first company I worked for was Ion Storm. I got really, really lucky. And the first game I got to work on there was Deus Ex. I got to come on as a level designer. And that was a pretty mind-blowing experience for me. And like I said, I was really fortunate to uh, meet those people and be a part of their team. And then since then, I've worked on mostly the same kind of game, sort of action RPGs slash immersive sims. I've been at a couple of other places, but eventually I landed at Arcane with a lot of the same people from Ion Storm plus a bunch of other great people. And that's where I've been the longest, probably 15 years. Worked on Dishonored and Prey Moon Crash and a bunch of other stuff. Lots of DLC for those games, Redfall. Uh, and then unfortunately, Arcane came to an end earlier this year. And now I am waiting to see what the next thing I'm going to do is.
So, thank you for that, that rundown, that quick elevator pitch or what have you. Um, first off, my condolences over the studio, everything that went down, or how, however you'd like to phrase it. I think it's no secret what happened, or more or less, high level, it's no secret. So, just my condolences. That understandably would really have sucked for everyone involved.
Yep.
Um, sorry, I'm trying. I'm trying to think of like the best way to say it all without,
Yeah,
you
and it's a
know,
bummer. I
without.
appreciate
Yeah,
it. It's a huge bummer.
Um, yes, and I'm fingers crossed for you and for everyone else that you're able to move on from there. Uh, land on your feet's like a really weird way to phrase it, but like I think you know what I'm trying to say. I just hope it works out for everyone. I think
Yeah,
is
but
the
there's a
easiest way.
yeah. I mean, it's easy to from personal experience, I can say it's really easy to feel bitter about it. But another way to, I guess, think about it, if to borrow a phrase from my wife, a benevolent reframe would be like, I got to have 15 years with a great studio, a great team. I made lifetime friendships, and I got to work on some of the greatest games of all time. So I can't really complain, other than being sad that it ended. You know.
You know, thank you. That is a wonderful way to rephrase it or to reframe it, to be like to think of like the good stuff that you actually did do, like what everything that you worked on. And like let's be honest, Dishonored, Prey, um two of the wildest, biggest series in my mind over the last, handful of years.
Mhm.
Um so like yeah, like being able to contribute to that, that is a wild thing that you
Yeah,
get to speak
pretty
to
lucky.
get to say, right?
Yeah, pretty lucky.
Now, I don't sorry. I was trying to think of how to like try and jump to the next thing, but like there isn't really an easy way to not to just like jump to it and, kind of not, you know, uh, s- acknowledge the fact that, trying to jump to hopefully a happier kind of topic or what have you. Um Now, I am curious though, because like you said, you started in '99 with Ion Storm,
Yeah.
which, anyone that's familiar with Ion Storm is its own piece of interesting history, but with Deus Ex especially being a fantastic game that, spawned an amazing series that I I personally have shilled out to more people than I should have because one year Steam was like, "Hey, do you want to buy 10 copies of Deus Ex for like $4?" And I was like, "Yes," and just started giving it to people.
That's amazing.
I'm still really confused what that bundle was about, but, it was the earlier days of Steam sales, so whatever, I took it and ran. But, like, I'm wondering, how is it that you got into developing and making games? And
Uh,
if you
yeah.
have any words of wisdom that you can share from your experiences, for anyone that, is maybe looking at going down the same path or what have you.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think somebody who wants to get into the industry today will have at least in one sense, will have a much different experience because when I wanted to get in the industry, you could go to art school, but not really for video games. And you could go to like a school to do computer science, but again, not specifically for video games. But nowadays, you can go, and a lot of universities, and most universities, as far as I know, have game design and game programming, game art, and all the other disciplines. They have whole tracks and degrees and stuff, which is fantastic. People debate if it's worth it or not, but like at least it's like it's there as a career option. You know what I mean? Um, Whereas you kind of had to figure things out for yourself back then. But I grew up playing video games when I was a kid. My we weren't like we didn't have a console. We weren't the kind of family that had a Nintendo or an Atari or anything like that. But my dad did bring a Commodore 64 home one day, uh, and that sort of changed everything. And there was another sort of track in my life that was like I was really into tabletop RPGs. And so the confluence of those two things really got me into gaming. And when I was in college, I really wanted to be a game designer or a game artist. I wasn't really sure. I just knew that I wanted to make games, either tabletop RPGs or video games. But the stuff that I was doing in college had nothing to do with that. But I graduated. I got a job in Austin moved to Austin with my wife. She got a job there too, unrelated to video games, but I knew that like Austin was the closest place on the map to me that I knew had video game companies like Origin and Digital Amble and a few others. And so when I got there, I just started like hounding people basically, being annoying. I would email, sometimes I would meet somebody, like I would write them an email or I'd meet them playing with them online, like Doom or something. And I'd ask to tour their studio and just like ask them, what do I need to learn? What do I need to do? Eventually, I met, that's how I met Harvey Smith. He wrote an article, a game design article. I think it was a website called the Adrenaline Vault. I'm not 100% sure about that. My memory's a little foggy, but he wrote a video game design article. I wrote him and he wrote me back. And eventually I got to meet him in person. We became friends. And he was like, you know what you should do? You should learn how to use the Unreal Engine. And I was like, great, I'll do it. And so I had my day job, but I was moonlighting every night. I would crack open the Unreal Engine and go to school basically teaching myself how to make levels and this is the original Unreal Engine. Um, and eventually I applied to Ion Storm a few months later with like sample levels and also like just all the things that I knew how to do, um, and got a job as a level designer.
So, thank you for sharing that. And uh, I always, you kind of addressed the thing that I'm laughing at. It's the idea that like, some of the people that I have on that I speak with, like yourself, are people that started a long time ago,
Hmm.
and quote unquote a long time ago, given all things considered, right? And the advice, to follow or what have you, is, it's hard to say it could still be relevant. Kind of like you touched on, that like back then, the wisdom that that would have worked then probably isn't going to work in the same way it does now. Like, as you spoke to, when I went through programming, I graduated in 2009, just at the most fun time for, the quote unquote once in a lifetime, financial crisis.
Hmm.
And the school I went to for programming, they had no game courses except for one, and it was using Flash. And that was it. That was the
Yeah.
entirety of like a one semester dedicated to making Flash games.
Wow.
And there was, and it was just a bunch of programmers too, by the way. So it's not like anyone or the large bulk of us had any clue how to do like art stuff or what have you. But anyway, just speaking to like the realm or like the era that it was in that, yeah, now like now you can go to school for this. Now you can actually, now there's YouTube stuff that'll give you a step
Oh
up when
yeah.
you go to school for this and all that.
I look at
Um,
YouTube videos all the time when I'm like, oh, I'm stumped by how to, do X, Y, or Z, in this game I'm working on, and somebody else already tried it and made a YouTube video about it or has an angle on it or whatever. That's like the internet is fantastic. That wasn't as prevalent when for at least for game development stuff. Like you could join up with like-minded people really easily now, and work on something together. There is one piece of advice that I think does apply. It applied back then and it applies today. And I say this as somebody who used to hire people, and that is anybody who wants to get into video games. And I have family members ask me this all the time too, like some younger family members, like, "Hey, what do I need to do to be a game designer or to make games?" Um, and the one thing that I think applies across the board is learn how to finish something. Like whatever it is you want to do, make art, make music, be a game designer, program, like pick a project and make sure it's the right scope and finish it so that you have something to show and so that you learn the discipline of like completing something. Everybody has ideas. Not everybody knows how to finish it. It's like I heard somebody say one time, everybody wants to have written a novel. Nobody wants to write a novel.
so thank you for that. That is That is wonderful advice. That is a yes, I especially love the, everyone wants to write a novel. Nobody wants or sorry, everyone wants, what have you, but no one wants to do it, right? Um, and like, yeah, so thank you. That's fantastic advice. Um, and like, yeah, and you kind of touched to, in today's climate world or what have you with like the internet, there's so many easy ways to find like-minded people.
Mhm.
And with all of those opportunities, the ability to find people to finish a project with, it's whether or not it's intentional or not, like the ability to find and have cheerleaders to help you on is probably also a huge boon to
Yeah.
finishing the thing, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
Um, so I am curious, just because you had mentioned that like with the sorry, the Commodore 64 is just it's always one of those things I laugh at just because like I'm I was born in the late 80s. So like
Mm.
the the Commodore just always amuses me as like a product. I don't know why. It just always makes me laugh that it existed. Um More so in like North America because
Yeah.
most of the computer stuff we had were like Apple IIs or what have you, and like
Yeah.
Europe got more of those kind of things.
Mm.
So it's just amuses me that we have those odd, like every one-off cross-pollinator kind of things.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm wondering, like from that era, was there a specific game or maybe like a tabletop or what have you? Like, was there something specific that you experienced that made you go, this is the direction I want to go? Or was it more or less just like a generic, you loved doing or playing all these things and like it all just sort of pushed you forward?
Yeah, I don't, at that age, I don't think I played a game and had the conscious thought, I want to do this. It was more that I played, I had those experiences and they just enchanted and transported me, and then later down the road, I was like, I want to do this too. Um, but early on, I think the very first game I ever played on the Commodore was The Bard's Tale, um, which was, one of those like old school RPGs, first person perspective, tile based, like move one square at a time with a party kind of a thing. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, um, and that was just like very transformative and enchanting. And I was also playing Dungeons and Dragons at the time. I just started to learn about that game, and that was also super transformative. Just playing RPGs, around a table with friends.
So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And like the I like the idea as well that, that everything kind of like accumulates. It builds on top of each other and like, pushes you forward. So like enjoying something like the Bard's Tale or tabletop would really easily translate or explain why you'd enjoy, getting to work on ARPGs, right? Because,
Yep.
you know, loosely or not loosely, depending on how you define these things, they're kind of very much in the same vein, or at least in the same like lineage down from grandchildren or what have you, right?
Mhm.
Um, but I also like the idea of playing games online and finding out someone is a developer and just being like, "Hey, how can I do this as well?" I don't know how trying to think of the right word. I don't know how, like, frequent that can happen in today's world. Um,
Probably
well,
not.
yeah,
That was
well,
like
like,
a random coincidence.
yeah, exactly, like, just the sheer, like, how that could have worked out, and, like, weirdly enough, I've had weird interactions online where I have played games with developers as well, and, like, it's one of those things where it's, uh I don't know how it worked out, like just
Mm.
a friend of a friend was always playing games, like part of their like the group they played with,
Yeah.
which always kind of blew my mind. But like just the chance happening to them be like, hey, can you give me some advice and like getting some usable, workable advice and like trying to go forward from that. So I just thank you. Thank you for sharing that is where I'm going. I like the idea of that and like how that would have existed in the weird late '90s kind of internet.
Yeah,
Um,
that's exactly what it was. In college, I used to play Ultima Online, um, which was like, one of the first, I guess, big MMOs. Uh, and I made lots of friends with people on that game, and one of them just coincidentally, like we were getting to know each other and stuff, and it turns out I want to say he worked for Raven, I think, in Dallas. Um, I believe that's correct, or maybe it was Ritual, something with an R. But it was a long time ago, and it was like mid to late '90s, and we were just getting to know each other. And I was like, man, I don't live very far from Dallas. I want to be a game developer one day. Can I come to your studio? And he was like super gracious and let me swing by one weekend and ask them questions and check things out. It was a really cool experience.
Yes, yes, that's sorry, I'm lost in how wild that that is just because um that's just such a wild thing. Yeah, like just
Yeah,
there's no way to really explain it, but
yeah,
that's just so cool, right? That's just
yeah.
really cool. Um Now you spoke to stuff like Bard's Tale and how that in general tabletops would have been some influences or things that made you realize um or later on in life like the foundation would have been planted and then like uh getting into speaking with other people and everything. Um I'm wondering when it came to like the actual learning um because you mentioned that Harvey Smith was like, yeah, you should learn to do level editing or what have you.
Mhm.
And this is most mainly like the angle I'm asking this from is more because like level making to me is always this wild thing.
Yeah.
I've spoken to a few people that do it and like hearing the thought process behind it. I'm wondering like how that worked for you going in kind of cold. But at the same time, if you were doing tabletop stuff, you would have already had that kind of foundation of the approach. Um, sorry, I hope, I know this is like a really weird question, but
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like the mindset of going in cold and then like going, yeah, I'm gonna make levels. Like, how did that work out for you? Like, yeah,
It
sorry,
wasn't
work.
it wasn't entirely alien in terms of like the idea of like making a space for players to experience. Like that part was like familiar to me. It was just that Unreal was like, this is a tool for doing that because before that, like I said, I'd played lots of Dungeons and Dragons, and 90% of the time I was the dungeon master, which meant that I was constantly inventing things and making maps. And at that point, I'd even written my own homebrew like RPG from the ground up. I had like, you know, doorstop thick manuals of a system that I had invented in a world and a setting and everything. Um, and I was super into video games as well, and I had already played around a little bit with like it was actually really cool because back in the day, Warcraft also shipped their the RTS, not before it became MMO. Warcraft shipped they shipped their level editor, and you can make levels and stuff. And so I made levels with like the Warcraft editor just for fun. Um, and so Unreal, of course, was way different than that because it was 3D, but it was still the like I'm being a dungeon master, making a space for players to explore and experience and stuff. And we would always say, anyways, uh, at Arcane and even places before that, that our secret sauce was that like our level designers are good at being dungeon masters. We're not for the kind of games that we make and that we made. Like it wasn't that we were setting up puzzles or challenges or anything like that. It was more that we were trying to make a deep place that was we were being really good, trying to be really good dungeon masters for the player.
So thank you for that. That makes a lot of sense. Like knowing that that was the mindset and how you approached it when you were learning to do it.
Hmm.
That just makes a lot of sense. So thank you for sharing that because that's really interesting. Just the large scale approach to how you would think about it and like already having the experience of doing it. Now, I imagine the benefit of learning to make the maps in Unreal or just in any game engine. the nicety of not having to herd a bunch of cats to then make them play it, right? That must have also been a huge benefit in versus D&D.
Right, yeah, of course. That's the thing about, I mean, that's one of the things that makes D&D so fun, of course, is that you sort of get to roll with the surprises. And honestly, of course, a video game has constraints. A player can't do anything. But that is one of the things that is appealing about the kind of games that I like to play and that I like to make. What you would call an immersive sim or an action RPG or something like that, is that within the rules of its own universe, the simulation allows for lots of fun, surprising things and player expressivity, which does sort of like echo the same kind of joy and experience that you can have at a D&D table playing with your friends, and one of your friends does something wild and unexpected and the game takes a turn.
Yes, I think one of the things that, because uh, immersive sims, as I said before we started recording, the one that actually made me understand or like see the magic of them was Deus Ex, and the chances that that game gave me to create interesting like interactions, whether it was accidental interactions, like for example on Lebedev's Jet, the first time I played it, I think it's Anna, I think is the one that comes in
Hey,
to
I did
deal
that was
with.
my level, by the way.
Oh, awesome.
So
So
hopefully you're
Eve
about to say something nice about it. Otherwise, it's not my
oh,
level.
oh, I'm not gonna say anything bad at all. This was the thing that this was I think this was the moment that I went, "This is where the magic is." And
Mhm.
I went in and, she comes in, she's like, "Kill Lebdev," and I'm like, "No," and then she kills me. And I'm like, "Okay, I know how I'm gonna play this one next." So I
Uh-huh.
reload the game because I died, right? And
Mhm.
I'm like, "This girl's gonna come in. She's gonna try and kill me." And I'm like, I'm gonna fail whatever checks I need to make her not kill me or whatever. I'm like,
Yeah.
I have a few lambs, and I just stuck the mines um, on the wall, and I'm like, this will slow her down at the very least. And I'm standing there, the whole scene with Lebedev, blah blah blah, and then she comes running in, and before the cutscene even like the cutscene doesn't even finish, and she blows up. And
Right.
the moment she blows up, Gunther is already screaming at me, or sorry, Alex is like, "Oh God, JC, what did you do?" And I'm just sitting there going, "Really, what did I do?"
Yeah.
Like that was the moment I realized it's not just levels. It's not just a few little tweaks here and there that you can do to influence the game. It's full on. You can kill a character what like super early, and the game rolls with it. The game has, a system set up to abide by and give you the freedom to play in that space.
Yep.
But sorry, so that just the speaking of that just reminded me of like of that, and like just having that kind of approach, it makes way more sense how games like Dishonored or Prey or just, in general, how immersive sims can be just handled. Or at least the earlier days of them that can be handled when, I think at the time there would have been arguably a small handful that people would have been aware of or like, been exposed to. Now in today's world, there's a whole bunch, which is really nice to see them coming out.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, so no, thank you for sharing that, that a mindset, that view or what have you.
I think
And
that what the moment you described in the Lebedev scene or whatever is a really good example of the design approach, right? I don't even know, like, like if immersive sims are a genre more, or are they more of like an approach to game design, right? Because I think, especially in the past, like the normal course for like handling a scene like that as a developer would have been like, what if the player puts explosive mines all over the walls? How do we stop them from doing that? And then you would have scripted something like, well, this zone is like a story zone, and so the game would have like prevented you from putting mines on the wall, even though it makes no sense that you shouldn't be able to, that you should be able to do that, right?
yeah,
But instead, the sort of immersive sim design approach like inverts that and says, what if the player puts mines on the walls? Well, what's the game going to do? Okay, well, we have to handle her blowing up, and what Lebedev says instead. But you just try to support you basically say yes. You try to support all the things that you have invited the player to do by putting those things in your game.
Um, sorry, I'm chuckling at the, well, what like, sorry, the mindset, like, well, what does that do? And the
Yeah,
answer is, well, yes, you paint the hallway of that 747 with Anna. That's what you do.
exactly.
Um,
And
so
all
sorry.
that comes from D&D, by the way. Like that's sort of like, at least for me and a lot of the people that I made games with, like all that comes from that because that's what happens at the table. You know what I mean? The if you have a dungeon master, I mean it's implicit in the game that like players are free to do things, that they want to do and that feel natural, versus just acting a script out.
So thank you for that, because that's wonderful advice to anyone that also wants to. I don't know if "wants to" is the correct word for DMing, but, that is in the role of DMing. Sorry. I've, um, I've had to take the role of DMing a few times, so the want versus the need, there's an argument to be made in the overlap between the 2, right?
Sure,
But
yeah,
no, that's also wonderful advice, or not, like, a view for that as well, to, the yes and kind
yeah,
of the improv approach, right? Um
exactly.
However, I don't think the improv approach really plans for the yes and you've stuck a bunch of mines to the wall. But anyway, um, now, Ricardo, I am curious about this, and feel free to answer this however you would like. And I know that this question, it can be a big one, it can be a little one. So I'm basically just, if you want to answer this small, by all means, you know, uh, the ball is going to be yours when I throw it to you. But with the the rise, I guess you would say, of immersive sims coming back into vogue. I don't think vogue's the
Mhm.
right word, but being seen more and being played more and people developing more, and beating back the immersive sim curse. I'm wondering, how you feel about the immersive sim landscape, as it's been or as it's coming into or what have you. And again, by all means, I know that can be a really big question or a really small question. You can answer it however you choose.
You mean like uh, the all the games that are out that are coming out now? Is that kind of what you're talking
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like how, how you feel about seeing, I don't want to say a renaissance, because there's, they've been coming around in certain shapes and forms or what have you. And you also spoke to, um, is immersive sim like a genre or like an idea or however.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah, it's
yeah, so like,
man, that's interesting because it does sort of take me back to what I said a second ago, where like, yes, it is true that like some people will choose to position their game as an immersive sim. But I think when you're doing that, you're talking to like a pretty small audience, relatively speaking. And I don't know if that's super useful or not. Um, that's why I kind of like, most of the time, I kind of prefer to think of immersive sim as an approach to making games more than it is like a genre like science fiction or role playing or fantasy. You know what I mean?
yes.
So I very much appreciate that a lot of games are sort of prioritizing player responsiveness, interactivity, improvisation, whatever you want to call it. But they're prioritizing, um, or have as a value, that same sort of magic that immersive sims have. It's what if the player does this? Let's support it. Um, so you could see that. I always use probably like a really easy go-to example is like Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. Not Wind Waker, sorry, Breath of the Wild. Um, it has a lot of the same design philosophy in it. Whether it was, conscious or not, or deliberate or not, or whatever. It just gives the player a lot of expressivity and the way you play the game, and I see that in lots of games, and I think that's just great because the more expressive, the more interactive it can be, I think the better.
So, thank you for speaking to that. And I really like that that answer, that like viewpoint that it's, it's not so much the genre, but that it's the vibe check. Sorry, I'm trying to
Yeah,
like the easiest way to
vibe.
phrase
Just
it.
have an immersive sim
Um,
vibe.
but like
Yeah.
the fact that that's kind of like the expressiveness or the reactionariness or what have you, that like there's, that it doesn't have to be a very strict set of rules, but like just the spirit of it and the spirit of it existing, whether intentional or otherwise, being this driving force behind what may or may not create an immersive sim or create a deep immersive sim versus a small one, right?
Yeah.
Um, I forget who it was, but they made the argument that the newer Hitman games were on the edge of, if not crossing into immersive sim territory because of how all the systems work together. And at first, and I imagine that for a lot of people, that would have been kind of like a contentious statement because, if you're trying to stand on tradition of what makes an immersive sim in the same way as a tradition of what makes an arcade shooter and what have you,
Mhm.
you're going to be a little resistant to growth or evolution, whether it's intentional or just because what you know is what you know, right? But like the more people say things like you just did, kind of like that's the spirit of it, the mindset or what have you. I keep butchering your exact words. I'm sorry.
No,
Um,
it's fine. I think it's interesting though that you said the most recent Hitman because I remember uh even the original Hitman, we were looking at it as like, wow, this game has awesome systems in it. They're very immersive sim like. They those games, as far as I can remember, those games have always been very open-ended in the player's ability to solve problems.
I really like the idea that, even back then that you guys were looking at that like those games going, that's an immersive sim right there. Or you know what I mean, right? Because
It
like,
has immersive sim qualities for sure.
yeah, because back then, that was I'm gonna say this and it's gonna be a little negative, but like back then we really did try and push games into like a very, very tight box of what they could be, right? It was
Yeah.
like, you're a third person game, you have guns, you're this, right? Like just jam it in there, ignore everything else. Um, but I like back then that there were signs of like acknowledging that the box is breaking or the box doesn't need to exist, right? Um, and even now I'm just even happier that like we see all sorts of weird genres crossing and mishing and mashing and you know needless to say I'm someone that's against the idea now of trying to like tightly define what a genre is or could be and jam it into that box just annoys me now but I like hearing back then that like you guys were like there's some stuff there just because you know you're right. Like the Hitman games have always been the Hitman game. It's not like the newer ones came along and redefined what Hitman was. They were always doing that. Just as technology got better, the shenanigans you could do just got bigger, right?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I like taxonomizing or categorizing games, like this is an RPG, this isn't this. I think that language is useful, like because it helps us know what we're talking about. Um, as long as you hold it with an open hand and just like those boxes, just as long as you like the boxes are useful, but just as long as you acknowledge that they're porous, you know what I mean? Um, some things don't fit exactly, but I wouldn't throw the boxes away either. I would just say like just hold it loosely, man. You know what I mean? Like we could debate all day long about what an RPG is, and it clearly there is something to it that we can all agree on that like some there's a typical set of features or whatever, but obviously there's thousands and thousands of counterexamples that don't exactly match, and then so like the language is useful, but also hold it loosely and recognize that it's a little bit porous, you know?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate you rephrasing it that way. You did a much better version of what I was getting at. So thank you. I always like it when I say something and someone's like, you can phrase it this way and it sounds much nicer." So thank you. I like the idea that, that yes, the box is fine, but it's, let it have some holes. Let it bleed out, let it bleed in, let whatever happens happen. You know, like
Yep.
yes, an RPG is an RPG, like you said, but we can let some other genres bleed in there and let it bleed out into others and not have to worry about now trying to close up that box and say, well, this other game obviously now has to be X and this other one now has to be Y or whatnot,
Yeah.
right?
One of my favorite writers is this guy named Richard Rohr, and he said, language should be a signpost, not a hitching post.
That is a wonderful quote. That is, thank you. All things considered for the context, yeah, that's a wonderful, wonderful quote. So thank you for sharing that as well.
Mhm.
Now, I am curious, just because you know, you've been in the industry a while. You've clearly been playing games and tabletops a while, making things or what have you, in some shape or form. And you had before we started, you had mentioned, or sorry, not before, but like after we started, you had mentioned, the holiday break and that you have children. So
Yeah.
I typically try not to ask too many kids questions because they're your kids, they're anonymous or they're anonymity, what have you, what have you. So I hope that this question is not too much going up against like any kind of personal boundary. If it is, my apologies.
No
I
worries.
am wondering though, when it comes to have being around so long and whatnot, were there any games that you got to experience with your kids that you experienced before, or maybe even not before, but got to experience with your kids and were able to be like, "Oh, hey, this is really cool," and like see the magic through their eyes? Um,
Man,
be-
1000%. Yeah, I'm happy to share about that. Some of my favorite experiences with my kids uh, are the games that we've played together. And I have 5 kids, and they have not all of them are super hardcore gamers. Some of them are, but they've all played here and there, and I've played games with all of them. And I have two funny stories. One of them is that it's interesting to see how like their tastes develop. Um, and there's like the cliche of like uh the dad that's like, I'm gonna teach my kid's gonna love football the way I love football, and then the kid grows up and he's like, I don't like football, Dad. I want to do theater instead or something. And so, like, my oldest son is super into games, which is great. We've played so many games together. But he also is his own person, of course, and he likes his favorite kinds of games are my least, in terms of genre, are my least favorite, which always makes us laugh. Like I don't like fighting games, probably because I suck at them like big time. But he's really good at them and he loves them. And of course, when he was little, I would play them with him because I love him. But I hate them so much. He's like good enough that he like competes in tournaments and stuff. Um, so that's always funny. You're like, oh, I'm like, yay, my kid's a gamer, and then I'm like, oh, he likes games that I can't stand. At least some of. Um, but the other thing, going back to your original question, was some of our favorite moments have been games that we both like and that we've shared together, like with our whole family. Like there was one Christmas where uh, we had it set up on a table, probably like 5 or 6 different laptops. Like my sister brought out her like work laptop. I had like a work laptop and a personal laptop, and my kid had a laptop. We had set up a networked game of Terraria, and and for the first time ever, we're like fighting the first boss, which is like I think it's called the Eye of Cthulhu or something like that. And all my kids were like super young then. They were like 10 and under, and it was just like, you know, my kids and their cousins and me sitting around this table at Christmas, like trying to fight the Eye of Cthulhu in Terraria. I don't know if you're familiar with that game, but it's like a 2D Minecraft. And it's a brilliant game. And it was just like us sitting at this table, like screaming and laughing for like hours, trying to beat this giant flying eyeball in this amazing game.
So thank you for sharing both of those stories. Both fantastic in their own right. It is, I imagine, amusing to everyone else in the same way it's amusing to me, and probably the same way it's amusing to you, that when you would have been, with your son playing fighting games, and like, when they were younger, going light, going easy on them, as I'm sure everyone's used to when they would play a fighting game with someone who's not experienced, or like a little brother or a family member or what have you.
It was the other
And
way
then
around. My son was
yeah,
you were trying to go easy on me.
and then, the table being flipped, and now he has to go easy on you,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
like it's like you're trying your hardest, and they're just like, yeah, whatever, I can do this. Like,
Mhm.
you keep button spamming, old man. Let's see what
Yeah.
happens.
But
um,
I love, they like my all my kids, they don't like the exact same kind of games that I like. But because I know the kind of games they like, it's fun for me to like, I'll be looking through Steam or whatever, and I'll be like, oh, my daughter would love this game. It's like a Papers, Please type of game or whatever. She loves little like adventure story kind of things, or Stardew Valley or something. So I love finding little gems like that to share with them.
yes, and again, thank you for sharing that as well. Just it's like I grew up playing a lot of video games with certain family members. On my father's side, at Christmas, we would all sort of show up at my grandparents, and there was a handful of us that would always be playing games. Back in the Super Nintendo era, so it would be swapping controllers back and forth. For the 64 era, I had three,
Mhm.
so it was always a weird time for playing like GoldenEye or what have you. But like I grew up kind of in that same realm of like family playing games, and I always just like hearing other people's stories similar to that. Obviously, everyone playing Terraria around a table together in like a land setup or what have you is kind of different than trying to play Mario Party and not rip your hand open while beating the other players. But like just it's the same idea, right?
Yep.
It's the same fun of being able to share that space and explore and experience it all together. So
Yep.
like, thank you for sharing that. Basically, is the short and long of that. I always love hearing those kind of stories, and yeah, they're just always nice to hear. So, Ricardo, I want to ask you this just because, I don't want to miss it. I don't want to get sidetracked going down a different path and like afterwards be like, I forgot to ask one of the questions I always like to ask, and that is outside of games, what is it that you enjoy doing? Like, how do you relax? And I understandably, with a lot of people or some people, it's still just more games, and that's completely understandable. And if that's the answer, perfectly valid answer. However, I do like to always give the opportunity to, to
Yeah.
like hear more about someone that doesn't have the gaming thing hanging over their head because, you're not only games, right?
Yeah, of course. I mean, my life, of course, is so impacted and influenced by gaming and gaming adjacent things that a lot of my life has to do with it. Um, but there are some other things. I mean, I say game adjacent because one of the things that I do love and that I do to relax is I have been playing D&D with uh the same group of people for some of them all the way going back to like early 2000s, and some of them going back 10 or 10, 12 years. It's all people from Ion Storm and Arcane. We've had it's a campaign run by my good friend Anthony Huso, who was a level designer on Dishonored. He was responsible for Lady Boyle's Last Party. He's a brilliant game designer and a brilliant dungeon master, and we play at his house every other week, every week or so. And I love painting minis for that. Is another creative outlet for me. And so that's super fun. I love getting together with those guys and playing Dungeons and Dragons. I love to read. Um, I love collecting books and reading on a wide variety of topics. That's uh, one of my favorite things about making video games is that uh, it causes me to want to go read stuff in order to make the game feel more real, right? So if I'm working on a game that has some kind of weird power related to neuroscience, I go read a bunch of neuroscience books, and I love doing that. But I also just read for enjoyment, unrelated to video games. And then I guess maybe the last thing I would say, the most relaxing and enjoying thing that has nothing to do with video games is I love traveling and hanging out with my wife.
So, thank you for sharing that. And I'm gonna hit you with a few follow-up questions to that one. Um, and I've some people have mentioned they like travel before, and I've never thought to ask this, but what was the most fun place you've ever traveled to?
Huh. Let me think. So the way that my wife and I travel is we think, what is like really good to eat in that place? Because I freaking love experiencing the cuisine of other places. Um, and so if it doesn't have good food, I'm like less interested in going there. Um, but I wasn't born here in the States, by the way. Like my mom is Spanish, and I was born in Spain, in Madrid. I grew up there until I was about 14, and I moved to the States when I was a teenager. Um, so I really love going to Spain because some of my family's there, and I freaking love Spanish food so much. So that's probably our favorite place to go. And also because like you can you can walk down the street and there's a building there, around every corner that's literally older than the entire United States as a nation, right? Um, so I love being places. I mean, I guess that would be the other thing besides like yummy food to eat is just like just getting to explore places that have like, wow, there's a castle over here or a museum over here or whatever. And so I think our favorite thing to do is just to go back to Spain.
You know, I it I'm Canadian. I've more or less kind of grew up and stayed inside of North America the entirety of my life.
Hmm.
And the idea that, in parts of Europe or large parts of Europe, that there's like a building that's existed longer than the country. Or like, if
Exactly.
you go to like the UK and it's like this this pub that has existed as a pub in the same family since like 1200, and it's like
That's
there is a legacy of family in here that is like 3 times older than my country or whatever, right? It's always hilarious just
yep.
because of like the time scale of how that could work. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Fascinating.
Um so, but thank you for sharing that. That's, always interesting to hear. And like, I always like the idea of traveling with a purpose. And even if that purpose is wanting to eat good food, right?
I
Um,
come to
like,
eat your country.
I don't think the country would appreciate that if you were big enough to do that, but um, but
Galactus
anyway,
proud. Oh.
yes, exactly. Thank you. I'm glad my joke made sense. Um, um, Now, I am also curious just because as, you had mentioned that when you were younger, you wrote, your own tabletop engine or your own tabletop system, or however you want to phrase this.
Yeah.
And that you play tabletops now, an ongoing game. Um, Again, congratulations on the herding of the cats. Um, because, anyone that's played D&D over a long period of time or has tried to even start D&D knows that cats are cats and it's hell to try and herd them. But I'm wondering uh when it comes to like systems, when it comes to rule books or however you want to phrase this, as someone that has made their own, I'm wondering if there are any that you could speak to that like you think if people were interested in getting into tabletop games might be worth looking into that's off the beaten path of just D&D or Pathfinder or what have you.
Oh, interesting. Well, I have to admit I'm not super up to speed on like contemporary game systems other than like Dungeons and Dragons. I could speak to a bunch of stuff I played back in the day apart from Dungeons and Dragons, but I mean even now, the group that I play with, we don't play fifth edition, we play first edition.
Oh wow.
because Anthony is super into that old school rules, and there's a lot of homebrew stuff on top of it, but it's first edition rules. Um, and I do play fifth edition with my family. Like I've taken my kids and my nieces and nephews and stuff through a bunch of campaigns in fifth edition, and that's always been a blast. But I don't have a whole lot of experience with stuff apart from that, like recently, like contemporary game systems. But when I was growing up, I played the Marvel system, which was super fun, like making up heroes. I played Rifts, I played Gamma World, all kinds of stuff. But it's typically we would always come back to Dungeons and Dragons. I do not think first edition D&D is a hey, if you've never played an RPG before, you should try this out. I don't think it's very friendly. Um, but I do think the fifth edition, even going back to third edition, like they've done a pretty good job of making the game friendlier. I mean, I think it's evidenced by how popular it is now relative to how it was back then.
So, so just to say, yes, from what I have heard as well, for the earlier editions, especially first, are very much not friendly. I had a friend who was playing. I want to say it was first or advanced, which was like 2 or 2.5 or what have you.
Yeah, second
Um,
second edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Yep.
but was speaking to just how brutal it was in that, like nowadays like a total party kill, it's probably with the DM, it's probably not going to be it's probably not going to be something that happens unintentionally, right?
Yeah.
Whereas was saying they had to restart several times before they just gave up because they kept getting killed because they didn't know how to balance things and just everything kept killing them. Like no matter what they did, no matter what the DMs attempt to like pull the
Yeah.
punches with the dice rolls, they just kept getting wiped. And
Yep.
like so yeah, I'm a little familiar with some of that. Now I am curious if you don't mind speaking to this because um and this can be in as few words as possible if that's how you prefer. How the hell does taco work? It
Oh,
never makes sense to me.
Thaco, or Thaco. Oh my God. Right. If Anthony was listening, if my friend Anthony was listening to this right now, he would be laughing so hard. Because it is a perennial debate where it's like I think it works as a system, but I think it is like to your question, the reason you asked it is because it is such a kludgy, unintuitive way to think about things. Like whether it has good game mechanics or not aside, like its friendliness, its like understandability is super crappy. It's always like, oh, I don't know what I'm supposed to, because it's all you have to invert the numbers, um, and different weapons have different. It's the kind of stuff that a computer would handle better, frankly, because it can really bog down the game. Trying to figure out that like, oh well, the mace's Thaco is different versus like plate armor than it is versus leather armor because that has a lower AC. It's just crazy. I don't think I should try to explain it because we'll be here all night.
That is very fair. I kind of set you up for failure on that one just because my only experience with it is from the old CRPGs from Baldur's Gate,
Yeah,
and I didn't understand it there. And that was, as you said, a computer was handling it, and it made no
yeah,
sense to me.
yeah.
The
Computer was doing
only
that for you.
Yes, and even then it made no sense. And like the only thing I really took away from it then, and this was with with friends and we were all playing it, was just try and be as low as possible.
Yep,
That was the only thing we said. Is like, how does this work? Just go low. Just try and be low. And
right.
fingers crossed that we were
Yeah,
low enough to not get bopped by a goblin with a mace versus a goblin with a sword or an exotic weapon like a saber or however the classifications were in the old D&D.
yep,
Um, but
yeah.
no, thank you for touching on it. As I said, I kind of set you up for failure on that one, so thank you for taking it in stride.
It's terrible.
Um, especially if you're not familiar with it, it's
Oh my gosh,
even worse because like, what the hell's happening here?
yeah.
Um, but Ricardo, Um, Ricardo, I don't want to like steal a whole lot more of your time. I do want to let you, enjoy your Friday evening, get back to your kids or get back to the family or just enjoy your evening as we are getting as the sun is down and it's getting later on. However, I'm wondering if you are okay with me hitting you with some lightning round questions before we go.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're good to go for till 8:30 if you want. So whatever you want to do.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you for that. I will have you out of here by then, so there's no worries there.
Hmm.
The lightning round is very quick. They are nonsense questions. You can answer them however you see fit. Um, I am going to warn you in advance that because they're a little random, and they are nonsense, don't stress too much about
Okay.
trying to figure out what it actually means because as I have found with myself and some other people, depending on the question, depending on how it hits for you, it can just be a really weird rabbit hole that leads nowhere good. That
Okay.
may or may not make sense. We'll see what happens.
And I'm supposed to just give short, quick answers, right?
Well, for your sanity, I would say that's probably the safer mindset.
Okay.
You can give longer ones, just be aware that you might regret that when you start asking why it is you're trying to figure this out. But
Okay.
we'll see how the questions go with that one.
All right, let's do it.
Awesome. So, which video game character do you think is most likely to put orange juice over their cereal?
What? Oh my God. I don't even know how to answer that.
You're welcome.
I'm thinking in games that I've worked on, as a reference point. Um, Granny Rags.
Thank you for that. And I want to note that that was the kind of question that I was saying. It's you'll
Okay,
understand why it's
okay.
might be safer just to not worry too much.
Definitely caught me off guard with that. All right.
We'll see how the bot feels for some others.
Okay.
If a fast food restaurant had a meal based on your favorite game series, what would that meal be?
If a fast food restaurant had a meal based on your favorite game series. Um, oh, what? I have to think of what is my favorite game series. Hmm. I hate the favorite questions because like I always feel like I can't pick one. Um, but I do love RPGs that have like that go the extra mile and invent like fun foods in their games. We always tried to do that, like with Prey and Dishonored, like jellied eels and stuff like that. So I have to give credit to Fallout for inventing a bunch of crazy medications and drinks and foods. Wait, am I supposed to pick the food or the game series or
the
the
the fa- the food type was the
yeah?
ideal, I guess you would say.
We'd need to have some like rats on the sort of rats on the whatchamacallits, the
Spits.
no, the in Fallout, the rats on a stick, you know?
Oh yes, okay. Um, I don't think McDonald's is going to be or Burger King or whoever is going to be jumping to get that one, but one day maybe we could
Yeah,
a meteor could crash and that could really really change the
that's
the
fewer.
landscape of what McDonald's does.
Yeah.
I'm gonna hit you with one more. We'll see how this one goes. Apparently, it really wanted to ask the orange juice one again. Let me smack it again.
Oh, this is like randomly generated, huh?
They kind of are, yeah. Um, so if the graphics of the first game you played were swapped with the last game you played, which do you think would be the better game?
Oh my God. Uh, man, you know what's really funny about this question? So one of the first games I ever played is The Bard's Tale, which is like an RPG from the 80s. But I'm I'm currently working on an indie game that has throwback graphics. And because of that, I'm playing a lot of like pixel art games and stuff. So the answer to this question is they would look the same.
That's perfectly fair, especially you just yeah, perfectly fair. And
Yeah, it's
um
the time is a circle or time is a flat circle or whatever. It's like they would be pretty much identical because of the kind of games I'm playing right now.
now I am curious, what game is that if you don't mind name dropping it?
Um, I'll mention a couple of them. It's stuff like UFO 50, which is like this really fantastic collection of 50 games that all have like cool throwback, like old school graphics. You basically get 50 games for the price, of one. It's another old classic like Shattered Pixel. It's like a little roguelike that has pixel graphics. Um, and another one I was just playing is called I think it's called Kingdom Two Crowns. It's a really beautiful pixel art game. Um, it's kind of like side scrolly, but it's a sort of a tower defense style pixel game.
Awesome. So thank you to speaking to answering that one. I'm familiar with UFO 50, and like the idea of it is, to
Oh,
me,
it's
that's a
so
wild thing.
boring. Scald. I just finished Scald also, which is another old school RPG. Sorry to interrupt you, but
Oh yeah, no worries there. I was just saying, thank you for dropping, mentioning those games. UFO 50, I'm probably eyeing it up over the holiday just because it's such a wild concept. But also, thank you for mentioning the others to look into as well. Um, Sorry, something just randomly fell on my desk and it confused me. Um, anyway, Ricardo, thank you for going through the lightning round with me. My apologies for the confusion of orange juice on cereal and what have you. But yeah, you survived it, so to say.
I made it.
Um, you made it through. But with that being said, there wasn't much else that I wanted to bother you with when, like I said, when trying to wrap things up and let you get on with your evening. However, if there was something else you did want to throw out there, or other cool games you might want to throw out, or just, what you're working on, or something you feel people should just be more aware of, by all means, the floor is yours. As well, please let everyone know where they can find more information about you, which I'll also include in the episode description.
Well, since leaving Arcane, or since Arcane left me, or whatever you want to put it, um, uh, it it's interesting because one of the questions you had on your list was what kind of game would you like to create if given the freedom? And so without asking for it, I was given the freedom. I haven't taken a job anywhere else since Arcane closed down, and I probably won't for a little while longer. But it has given me the freedom to do something I've always wanted to do, which is to work on a small game that I could make by myself or just with a couple of friends, just a very small group. And so that's what I've been doing for the last, I guess, 6 months now. And it's been a blast. I can't really say anything about it yet, but hopefully, maybe, next year we'll be able to talk about it a little bit. But it's been really work on a little like indie action RPG, just me and a few other friends. That's what I've been doing, and I know that's a little cryptic, but we'll see.
So, I'm happy to hear that, that I, I don't know how to phrase this appropriately. So bear in mind the words that I use. Don't take them too deeply or what have you. But I'm glad that you have been afforded the ability to like explore that freedom,
Yes,
and like make something. That's just the context of everything. It's a really weird thing to say, but
yeah, yeah,
you know, I'm happy
I
that
get,
you have that opportunity.
yeah.
As well, fingers crossed that it works out for you guys. I'm not trying to pry or just, I fingers crossed that it is something that works out because, um, making something for yourself that you're able to like put out there and people in it can enjoy or what have you, that's just always a great thing. So like I hope for the best for everyone that's participating or contributing or part of the team or whatever the right word is in this instance, you
Yeah,
know?
thank you. I appreciate that. I'll definitely pass it on.
And in that same vein as well, where can anyone, if they want to learn more about you, where can they find more about you?
Uh, I'm not super big on social media stuff, so I'm a little bit kind of in stealth mode online. I do have a Twitter/X account that people could definitely message me on if they want to. But other than that, I'm pretty fairly private.
As someone that hits that line themselves, I completely understand um, the 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 urge, the need, or what have you to like avoid social media or what have you because it's social media. Um, so I completely understand that, and yeah, definitely. And I hope that that continues to be good for you. For whatever reasons that you prefer your privacy. I just hope that, that's a thing that keeps working. That's a weird thing to say, but I hope that makes sense as coming from someone else who also
Yep.
does not really like to share or like feel the need to be personal, you know? Um,
Sure.
yeah, anyway, sorry. But outside of that though, Ricardo, there isn't anything else for me to bother you with. So if there wasn't anything else you wanted to make sure people were aware of or what have you, I will let you get on with your Friday evening.
All right. Well, it was certainly fun to talk to you, and thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I really appreciate it. It was a really good time.
Ricardo, again, by all means, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for, letting me steal that time. I'm glad that you enjoyed yourself. I think that's one of the things I like hearing the most from people is that like they, it was fun. They enjoyed being a guest or what have you. So thank you. I'm happy that I have not ruined the idea of podcasts for you.
Not at all. All right, Link.
Um,
Take care.
you as well. Now, thanks again to Ricardo for making time to have this conversation with me, and thank you for joining us on the Red Tunic podcast, as well as a special thanks to Ron Jankies for the use of music from the title track from Road Steep. And be sure to check out the episode description for links to socials, websites, and other means that will allow you to learn more about or support Ricardo in the podcast. While you're doing that, share, like, follow, whatever else you think makes the algorithm work. Thanks. Till next time.